Christmas dinners at my mother's house were usually chaotic, but that year, the chaos carried a different weight, something quieter, heavier, like a shadow draped over every corner of the house. Hey everyone! Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories like this. Now, let's start today's story. It wasn't the usual holiday stress, the kind that came from burnt pies, forgotten presents, or mom yelling at Daniel to stop sneaking bites of turkey before guests arrived. No, this tension was different. It clung to the air like dust in an abandoned room, swirling around us, impossible to ignore. I'd barely stepped through the door when I noticed the looks being exchanged between my family members. Not the tight, half-joking grimaces we usually shared during holidays. Not the sympathetic, here we go again, smiles whenever mom forgot where she placed the gravy boat. These looks were sharp, secretive, nervous. It was as if they were all waiting for something to happen, something they hoped wouldn't but knew inevitably would. Trying to shake off the unease, I hung my coat, kicked off my snowy boots, and made my way to the dining room. The familiar scent of roasted turkey, cinnamon, pine, and mom's special cranberry glaze hit me all at once, wrapping around me like a warm blanket. The table setup looked exactly the same as every year, the red antique candles she only lit on Christmas Eve, the gold-rimmed plates we weren't allowed to touch any other day, and garlands woven around the chandelier like a crown of evergreen. At first glance, everything was normal, comforting, almost nostalgic. But the atmosphere was taut enough to snap. My older brother, Daniel, usually the loudest person in any room, sat stiffly at the table, poking at a piece of bread without saying a word. That alone was alarming. Daniel could talk a brick wall into opening up about its childhood trauma. My mother kept smoothing the tablecloth, even though it was perfectly flat and spotless. Every few seconds, she'd press her palm down and exhale sharply. My younger sister, Mia, sat rigidly at the far end, braiding and unbraiding a section of her hair while very intentionally avoiding my gaze. I took my seat, trying to cut through the awkwardness with humor, the same way I had for years. "So," I said, glancing around. "Everyone okay? You all look like someone told you Santa filed for bankruptcy." A few forced chuckles. But no real smiles. Mom cleared her throat and began passing dishes around. "Let's just enjoy dinner. It's Christmas, after all." She sounded like someone trying to convince herself of her own words. We ate in an uneasy silence, forks clinking lightly against plates. I tried to follow normal conversation patterns, asked Mia about school, asked Mom about the neighbors, asked Daniel about work, but every answer was short, clipped, almost rehearsed. Then, only minutes into the meal, Daniel suddenly set his fork down with a loud metallic clatter. The noise sliced through the room like a blade. Everyone froze. Even Mom stopped mid-reach with the mashed potatoes. Daniel stared at me. Not a casual glance, not even concern. It was a stare filled with a warning I didn't understand yet. "Alex," he said slowly, "did you check the attic?" The words dropped into the silence like a stone into deep water, sinking, pulling everything down with it. I blinked, confused. "What?" No one breathed. He swallowed hard. "Just answer the question." Mom's hand tightened around her napkin until it crumpled. Mia's lip trembled. The dread in the room thickened like fog. I forced out a small laugh. No. Why would I check the attic? I haven't been up there since last Christmas." Daniel's expression didn't change. "You should have." A chill crept down my spine. The attic. The place Dad spent hours in the year before he died. The place where boxes full of his old journals, tools, and unfinished projects sat collecting dust. The place we all silently avoided after the incident, an event we had collectively erased from conversations, almost from memory, as if pretending it never happened would make the weight of it disappear. I swallowed. "Is this about Dad?" Mom shut her eyes, her face tightening as if she'd been slapped by the name alone. She shook her head, voice barely above a whisper. "Daniel, please, let's not do this tonight." "No," Daniel snapped, looking at her for the briefest second before turning back to me. "He needs to know." My heart thudded. "Know what?" Daniel took a deep breath. His voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "Something's up there." My breath caught. "Up there? Like, what?" He hesitated. That alone scared me more than anything. Daniel never hesitated. His eyes flicked to Mom, almost as if asking for permission. She didn't give any. She didn't even look at him. Then he spoke again. "Something was left for you." My stomach dropped so fast it felt like the floor had opened beneath me. Something left for me? By Dad? Why would he? Before I could ask anything else, a sudden, heavy thump sounded from upstairs, directly above us. Mom gasped. Mia's chair screeched across the floor as she stumbled back from the table. Daniel shot to his feet instantly, knocking his chair over in the process. My blood turned to ice. The attic was directly above the dining room. Tell me you heard that, I whispered. Daniel's jaw clenched. That's why I asked you. Another thump. Then a dragging sound. Something moving across the old wooden boards. No. Not something. Someone. The breath left my chest in a sharp, painful exhale. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the table. I had spent the last year convincing myself that Dad's last months were just a phase, a strange, grief-fueled episode we'd never fully understood. I convinced myself the attic was empty. That whatever had happened up there died with him. But the thumps above my head, they said otherwise. Christmas dinner had officially twisted into a nightmare. And as I stared up at the ceiling, dread burrowing into every nerve in my body, I felt the truth settle in with cruel clarity. My father hadn't told us everything before he died. And whatever secret he left behind was waiting for me in the attic. I stood at the bottom of the staircase for a long, trembling moment. My family clustered behind me in an uneven line, their breaths shallow, their eyes fixed on the dark landing above as if expecting it to swallow us whole. The warm glow of the Christmas lights filled the hallway downstairs, soft, golden, comforting, but that light didn't reach the top of the staircase. It stopped halfway, cut off sharply, as though the second floor had refused to join the holiday at all, as though it had been waiting for something else. Daniel nudged me gently yet firmly. You're going up first. My voice died in my throat before I managed a whisper. Why me? He swallowed hard, his expression tight with a mix of dread and determination. Because Dad left it for you. I didn't argue. There was no point. Some part of me, some buried, uneasy instinct, already understood that whatever waited upstairs had always been meant for me. Something my father had hidden, something he hadn't had the courage or time to explain before his life unraveled. But the attic? The one place he'd forbidden us from entering for months. The place he'd padlocked from the inside during the last stages of his deterioration. My stomach twisted, but I nodded. I lifted my foot onto the first stair. The wood creaked, a loud, splintering complaint that made Mia gasp behind me. I started up slowly, each step groaning beneath my weight. The thumping we'd heard earlier was gone now, replaced by an unsettling silence that felt heavier than noise. Silence could lie. Silence could mask anything. As I climbed, the landing came into view, a narrow hallway lined with old family photos. Birthdays, road trips, Christmas mornings, beach vacations. Smiling faces frozen in time. Dad, younger, vibrant, with his arm around me, around Daniel, around Mom. Moments long before fear started living behind his eyes. Before he began locking himself away for hours. Before the attic became off limits. Daniel joined me at the top, flashlight clutched tightly in hand. Ready? No, I said honestly, but let's do it anyway. He nodded once and fell in step behind me. We walked down the hallway, the floorboards giving tiny groans under our feet. The air felt colder at the far end where the attic door waited. Old brass handle. Thick dust coating the wooden panel. But something stood out, a small patch near the bottom of the door where the dust had been smudged away, as if touched by a small hand. A cold shiver crawled up my spine. You see that? Yeah, Daniel breathed. Let's check the lock. He aimed the flashlight at the latch. His brow furrowed. It's broken, he whispered. My pulse spiked. Broken? How? Something snapped it from the inside. His voice held something I'd never heard in him before, fear. I reached for the handle. It was ice cold against my skin. I pushed gently, and the attic door creaked open with a deep, aching groan that echoed down the hallway. The sound made my heart lurch. It felt like the house itself was warning us. The air that seeped out was stale and heavy, thick with dust and something older, like secrets that had sat too long in the dark. We stepped inside. The beam of Daniel's flashlight cut through swirling dust motes, revealing a maze of old boxes, plastic containers of holiday decorations, rusted tools, broken furniture, and stacks of Dad's yellowing papers. It looked like any other neglected attic, except it didn't feel like one. There was a wrongness in the air. Alex, Daniel whispered. I followed his gaze. Footprints. Small, dusty, human footprints. A clear trail across the attic floor. Footprints that absolutely did not belong to any of us. My mouth went dry. Tell me you've been up here recently. Daniel shook his head slowly. I haven't been in this attic since the day we closed it up. We followed the prints deeper into the room, each step stirring more dust into the stale air. Shadows leaned long and strange across the walls, stretching too far, bending oddly with every shift of the flashlight. Then Daniel froze. Look. At first, I didn't understand what he was pointing at. Then my eyes adjusted. A stack of old boxes had been dragged aside, not fallen, not nudged, but moved deliberately, revealing a small iron trunk. One I'd never seen before. The metal looked aged, slightly rusted, but what made my breath falter was the name engraved into the lid. Alex. My knees nearly gave way. Daniel's voice shook. Dad made that for you before he died. My hand hovered over the trunk. Memories flickered, Dad trying desperately to speak in his final weeks, his trembling hands reaching for me, the fear in his eyes whenever he looked toward the ceiling, the attic. How he'd scribble notes only to tear them up moments later, muttering that it wasn't time yet. That he had to protect me. Protect me from what? With a deep breath, I knelt and opened the trunk. Inside lay several objects, a bundle of letters tied with fraying string, a dusty leather-bound journal, a small wooden box with carvings I didn't recognize, and I froze. A recorder. Old. Silver. A cracked play button, but intact. A note lay on top, play me first. My voice trembled. Daniel. He knelt beside me. You're not listening to that alone. Before I could reply, the attic floor creaked, not beneath us, but behind us. We whipped around. At the far end of the attic, half hidden in shadows behind a pile of boxes, a figure stood. Small. Hunched. Unmoving. A cold shock tore through me so violently I couldn't breathe. Daniel's whisper quivered. Do you see that? I nodded, unable to force out a sound. Slowly, the figure stepped forward into the faint spill of light. A boy. No older than 7. Pale as moonlight, gaunt, with tangled dark hair and enormous eyes reflecting terror and exhaustion. He looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. I stumbled backward until I hit a stack of boxes. Who are you? The boy opened his mouth, but no words came out at first. Only a trembling breath. Then, like it hurt to speak, he lifted a thin arm and pointed at the trunk. Then at the recorder. And finally at me. His voice was hardly more than a ghost of sound. He told me, to wait for you. The attic felt like it shrank around us the moment the boy's trembling words settled into the stillness. The air thickened, heavy as wet cloth, pressing in from every direction. My heart thudded painfully, too fast, too shallow, as if the simple act of breathing had become unfamiliar. Daniel stepped in front of me on instinct, protective, tense, even though neither of us could explain why a boy barely 7 years old had triggered such primal fear. The child didn't move. Not an inch. He simply looked at me, then at the recorder still resting in my palm, as if urging me to hurry. His wide eyes glistened in the flashlight beam, full of something between desperation and exhaustion. Daniel's voice cracked the silence. Kid, what's your name? The boy shook his head slowly, deliberately. Daniel frowned. You don't remember? Or you won't tell us? Another shake. My pulse pounded in my ears. I stepped forward just enough to meet the boy's gaze. Did he know you? The boy nodded. The breath was knocked out of me. I looked at Daniel, whose face had drained entirely of color. For a moment, neither of us spoke, too stunned to find words. But, how long have you been here? I whispered. The boy dropped his gaze to the wooden floor. His bare feet were dusty and pale. A long time, he murmured. A very long time. Ice prickled down my arms. Months? A year? Longer than Dad had been gone. The horrifying realization hit with staggering force. This child had been living in our attic, alone, hidden, terrified, for God knows how long. And Dad had known. Dad knew, I whispered, barely hearing myself. Daniel's fists clenched so tightly his knuckles whitened. Why would he hide a child? And why tell only you? Before I could answer, the boy tugged on my sleeve, gentle but urgent. Please, listen. My hands trembled as I lifted the recorder from the trunk. The metal felt wrong, colder than it should have been, like it had been lying in ice, not dusty attic air. I pressed the play button. Static crackled. Then, Dad's voice. Alex, if you're listening to this, then I failed. Daniel sucked in a breath and swore under his breath. I tried to protect all of you, but the truth couldn't stay buried forever. He needs you. He trusts you. You're the only one who can help him now. There was a long pause. A ragged cough. And I'm sorry for what you're about to learn. Then static. Then silence. The attic felt colder. Smaller. As though the very walls listened. My throat tightened painfully. Tears burned behind my eyes but didn't fall. Dad sounded exhausted, frightened. I had never heard fear in his voice until those final months, and hearing it again made my insides twist. Before I could speak, the boy whispered, "Your dad saved me." Daniel crouched carefully to eye level with him. "Saved you from what?" The boy didn't answer. Instead, he lifted a trembling hand and pointed across the attic, toward the old wooden wardrobe in the corner. Dust covered it in a thick layer, yet something about it looked wrong. Too still. Too expectant. A chill crawled up my spine. "I heard things, in there," the boy whispered. "Before he found me." My stomach flipped. The attic suddenly felt colder, the air sharper. "Daniel," I breathed, "go downstairs. Get Mom. And Mia. We need." "No." The boy grabbed my arm, surprisingly strong for his size. His wide eyes flashed with panic. "They can't come up here. It'll scare them." My blood ran cold. "What will?" He didn't look at me. His gaze locked on the wardrobe as though terrified to blink. "He didn't get it out," he whispered. "Who?" Daniel asked. The boy swallowed. "Your dad. He tried to trap it. But it's still here." I felt rooted to the spot. Terrified to move. Terrified not to. "What is?" I whispered. The boy hesitated, then reached into the pocket of his oversized sweater. He withdrew a folded piece of paper, crinkled, creased from being handled over and over. With trembling hands, he offered it to me. I unfolded it slowly. It was a drawing, childlike, made with uneven pencil strokes. At first, I thought it was scribbles. But then Daniel lifted the flashlight, and the full image revealed itself. A child, small, frightened, stood in front. Behind him, towering impossibly tall, was a shadowy figure with long, unnatural limbs. A blurry, melted-looking face. Sharp, contorted fingers. And red eyes glowing through the darkness. My heart nearly stopped. The boy pointed at the drawing. "It wants you now." A deafening thud shook the attic. I jumped. Daniel pulled me behind him. The boy whimpered and pressed against my back. A second thud followed, louder, rattling the boxes around the wardrobe. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Daniel's mouth dropped open. "We need to get out. Now." The boy shook his head violently. "If you go, it follows." "What follows?" Daniel hissed. The wardrobe creaked. Slowly. A long, drawn-out groan of wood straining. As if something inside was pushing. My skin felt too tight for my body. "We need to go." "No," the boy's voice was sharp and terrified. "If you go, it goes with you. It follows whoever it wants. And it wants him now." His small hand gripped my shirt. Daniel cursed under his breath. "Alex, we are not staying here with, whatever that is." But the wardrobe trembled again. And this time, something inside scraped against the wood. A slow, dragging sound. The boy's voice cracked. "Your dad tried to finish this. But he couldn't. You have to." I stared at the wardrobe, at the rattling door, at the shadows shifting behind it. My father had known. He had hidden this, fought it, contained it. And now it was waking up. I reached into the trunk with shaking hands and grabbed the journal Dad had left for me. Whatever he had been trying to protect us from, whatever secret he took to his grave, it was alive. And it was no longer sleeping. It was waking up. Dad's journal was worn, its leather cover cracked and soft like it had been handled obsessively, like someone had clutched it the way drowning people cling to driftwood. Pages stuck out at odd angles, some wrinkled as if gripped by sweaty hands, others stained with small brown marks that made my stomach twist. I flipped it open with trembling fingers just as the wardrobe at the far end of the attic gave another deep, shuddering thump, the kind that vibrated straight into bone. Daniel stepped in front of me, positioning himself between the wardrobe and us, flashlight raised like a pathetic weapon that wouldn't help against anything we were actually dealing with. The boy, Dad had just called him the boy, clung to my sleeve, his tiny fingers icy cold, like he'd been standing out in a winter storm instead of the attic's heat. The first page of the journal was dated 9 months before Dad died. I hear the footsteps again. They never match my own. A chill snaked down my spine. The attic was dead silent except for the soft whimper of the boy and the occasional shifting groan of the old house. Yet I felt it, like something unseen was pacing, matching the rhythm of my heartbeat instead of my steps. I read on. The boy isn't talking yet, but I see the truth in his eyes. He's not alone up here. Something followed him. My breath hitched. I slowly swallowed, the attic's dusty air scraping my throat. Something followed him. From where? Why bring him home then? I turned the page. It hides in the wardrobe during the day. Comes out at night. Watches. Waits. I've locked it in, but the wood is too old. It won't hold forever. As if answering the words, the wardrobe creaked loudly, the old wood bending, straining. Something inside shifted with deliberate slowness. Daniel muttered a curse under his breath. The boy pressed closer to my side, his cold cheek brushing my arm like he was trying to anchor himself to me. Keep reading, he whispered, his voice so soft, it barely existed. I did. Alex must be the one to help him. He won't trust anyone else. I don't know why, not yet, but the thing fears Alex. That's the only reason we've lasted this long. The sentence hit me like a hammer. Fears me? What could possibly fear me? I wasn't anyone special. I wasn't brave. I wasn't strong. I was barely keeping myself together as it was. What? I whispered. Why would anything fear me? No one answered. Because at that moment, the wardrobe lurched so violently that dust exploded from the ceiling and rained over us like gray snow. Daniel swung his flashlight toward the doors, breathing hard. The journal nearly slipped from my hands. Daniel grabbed my shoulder. Alex. We leave. Now. I mean it. But the boy shook his head violently, eyes going wide with a terror so deep it didn't look entirely human. If you go down that ladder, it'll follow you. All of you. Even your mom. Mom. The thought of that thing trailing her through the dark halls downstairs made bile rise in my throat. Before I could speak, the wardrobe gave another creak, longer, louder, like it was inhaling. I flipped to another page, pages fluttering like panicked wings. I found the boy outside the old mill. He wasn't speaking, just staring at something I couldn't see. When I brought him home, it followed. It only wants Alex. It always wanted Alex. Daniel's jaw dropped. Why you? I don't know, I choked out. I don't know. The attic lights flickered violently above us, buzzing, then popping. Then, darkness. Complete darkness. Only Daniel's flashlight remained, a shaky cone of white cutting through the thick black. We froze. A low, guttural scraping sound echoed from the wardrobe. Not human, not animal. Something was dragging itself across wood, slowly, deliberately. My chest tightened, breath coming in shallow bursts. The boy pressed his face into my arm, trembling so hard it felt like his bones were vibrating. Please, he whispered, finish the last page. He said it tells you how to stop it. My shaking fingers scrolled through the journal until I found the final entry, the last thing Dad had ever written. The handwriting was frantic, uneven, like Dad had written it while terrified, while something pressed closer and closer to him. It knows Alex is coming. That's why it's growing stronger. The only way to stop it is. The page ended abruptly, ripped, completely torn away. My heart plummeted to the floor. No, 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 where is it? I cried, flipping frantically through the journal, but there was only empty space where the page should have been. Gone. The most important page, missing. Daniel swore, tightening his grip on the flashlight. He pointed the beam at the wardrobe. The doors were opening. Slowly. Not fully, just enough for something long and thin to slip through, a shadow that bent wrong with the light. A hand, not quite human, not quite shadow, curled around the frame. Its fingers were too long, too jointed, like someone had sketched a hand from memory and gotten the proportions wrong. My breath caught in my throat. What do we do? I whispered. The boy tugged my shirt urgently. The box. What box? He pointed to the small wooden box inside the trunk beside us. I scrambled toward it, hands shaking violently as I lifted the lid. Inside was a single key, a brass key. It shouldn't have been warm in the freezing attic, but it pulsed with heat against my palm, faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. What is this? I whispered. The boy swallowed hard. Dad told me, that key is the only thing that can lock it away again. Daniel grabbed my arm. Okay, then let's just close the wardrobe and lock it in. But the boy shook his head fiercely, almost panicked. No. You don't close it. He lifted his shaking hand and pointed upward. At the ceiling. At a hatch I had never noticed before, a small wooden square cut into the rafters, nearly invisible in the dim attic light. "You lock that, the hatch?" I asked, bewildered. "That's where it came from," the boy whispered. "Not the wardrobe. The wardrobe is just where it hides." A groan echoed from the wardrobe and the silhouette inside shifted, fully upright now, towering, stretching unnaturally tall. My heart nearly stopped. "We had seconds," Daniel whispered, voice cracking. "Alex, run." But the boy clutched my hand, his eyes wide and glowing with something fragile and desperate. Fear, yes, but hope too. "No, don't run." He pointed again at the ceiling hatch. "Climb." The attic transformed into pure chaos. The wardrobe didn't just shake this time, it exploded outward with a violent crack, the doors snapping off their hinges as splinters shot across the room like shrapnel. Daniel lunged forward, grabbing my arm and shoving me backward toward the center of the attic. The force nearly knocked me to the floor. A towering shadow spilled from the wardrobe, not stepping, not walking, but pouring out, like dense black smoke condensing into something that wasn't quite a shape yet. It shifted, rising and stretching upward until it took on the vague form of a body, tall, stretched, wrong. The boy screamed, a raw, terrified sound, and clung to my hand with fingers so cold they felt like ice. "Go, go now," he cried, pulling me toward the center of the attic. Above us, the ceiling hatch loomed, a small square of darkness cut into the rafters. I had lived in this house my entire childhood and I had never, not once, noticed that hatch. Now it felt impossibly far away, like a lifeline I wasn't sure we'd reach. Daniel darted across the attic, grabbed the metal ladder leaning in the corner, and slammed it beneath the hatch with a clang that echoed through the cramped space. "Climb, Alex," he yelled. "I'll hold it off." "You can't hold that thing off," I shouted back, voice cracking. He didn't answer, didn't even turn. His shoulders squared, the flashlight clenched in both hands like a sword. The shadow creature hissed, a metallic, slicing sound that scraped across the attic walls. It extended limbs that separated and rejoined like liquid shadow. Its eyes, red, faint, and burning, locked onto us, the same eyes the boy had drawn in that trembling sketch. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't paranoia. Dad hadn't been losing his mind. He'd been telling the truth. I forced myself up the ladder, climbing as fast as my trembling legs allowed. The boy scrambled behind me, climbing with surprising agility considering his small frame and overwhelming fear. He never let go of my shirt. The brass key in my palm grew hotter and hotter, almost painfully so. Below us, Daniel swung the flashlight, yelling, "Hey, over here. You want me? Come on." The creature's head snapped toward him. "Daniel, don't. I screamed, feeling my throat tear. But it was too late. The creature lunged, its shadow form stretching unnaturally as it collided with Daniel. The impact sent him crashing into a pile of boxes, cardboard exploding around him. He groaned but somehow pushed himself upright again, swaying on unsteady legs. "Keep climbing," he shouted hoarsely. "Go, Alex." I reached the hatch, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Dust rained down as I pushed against the wooden panel. It didn't move. It felt locked, sealed by something stronger than age. "Alex," the boy gasped, voice breaking, "use the key." "How?" Panic strangled me. He grabbed my hand and guided it toward a nearly invisible groove along the hatch's edge. I hadn't noticed it at all, not even in the flashlight beam. It was a keyhole, so old and hidden it blended completely with the surrounding wood. Hands shaking violently, I shoved the key inside. It slid in perfectly. Then, click. Slowly, with a grating creak, the hatch began to lift upward. A rush of air spilled down, cold, sharp, carrying the scent of pine, old wood, and something metallic, like dried blood. I blinked up at the darkness, expecting to see insulation or stray wires. Instead, the space above wasn't another attic. It was something older. A narrow crawl space lined with wooden beams carved with symbols, circles, slashes, shapes that didn't match any alphabet I knew. The carvings pulsed faintly with light the moment the hatch opened, as if waking from a long sleep. "What is this?" I whispered. The boy climbed past me, pulling himself inside the strange space with urgency. "This is where he kept it trapped. Before it got out. My father had built this? Or had he discovered something far older than our house?" I pulled myself into the crawl space. As soon as my weight settled inside, the carved symbols glowed brighter, warming the wood, humming faintly like a heartbeat. Below us, Daniel's voice cracked with fear. "Alex." I leaned over the edge of the hatch. The creature was inches from him now, crouched low, scraping elongated fingers across the floor. Daniel's face was pale with pain and terror, but he stood his ground. "Close it," he yelled. "Alex, close it now." My stomach dropped. "Daniel, you have to get up here," I pleaded. "Jump, I'll pull you." "No time," he shouted, voice breaking. "Close it, Alex." Tears blurred my vision. The fatigue, the fear, the guilt, it all hit me at once, sharp and blinding. I slammed the hatch shut. The moment it closed, Daniel screamed. And then everything went silent. Suffocating. Absolute. My entire body shook uncontrollably. The boy placed a small hand on my arm, grounding me. "He's okay," he whispered, though his voice trembled. "It can't follow him now. Not if you finish the seal." My throat tightened. "What do we do?" He pointed toward the center of the crawl space where a circular metal plate was embedded into the wood. Another keyhole sat in its center. "The seal," he whispered. "Your father said, you were the only one it feared. The only one who could close it." My father hadn't been protecting the boy. He'd been protecting me. I crawled forward, limbs numb, and pushed the key into the second lock. It was searing hot, burning, but I didn't let go. I turned the key. The symbols on the beams flared white. A scream erupted from below, not human, not animal, a deep, echoing roar that rattled the crawl space, shook dust loose from every beam, trembled the entire house. And then, silence. Thick, final silence. The symbols dimmed to nothing. The air stilled. The boy's shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "You did it." I looked at my trembling hands. The brass key was cooling now, its glow fading. "What happens now?" I whispered. He looked at me with sad, ancient eyes. "Your father told me, once it's sealed again, one of us can finally leave." "One of us?" I repeated, confused. He nodded. "I'm not supposed to be here. Not in this world." Before I could speak, the boy's skin began to glow. His outline blurred. His small body dissolved into soft, drifting light, as if he were becoming dust caught in sunlight. "No." I reached out, but my hand passed through him. "Thank you," he whispered. "Tell your dad." I listened. And then he was gone. Completely gone. When I climbed back down into the attic, the air was still. Heavy. Daniel lay unconscious, but breathing. Mom and Mia rushed up moments later, faces pale with worry, demanding answers I didn't know how to give. The wardrobe was empty. The shadow was gone. Dad's secret, his burden, was finally quiet. Christmas dinner ended early that night. And I understood something I'd never understood before. My father didn't die running from something. He died fighting it. For us. For me. I never opened the attic again. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is silent and the cold presses against the walls, I swear I hear a whisper. A child's voice. "Thank you." And a deeper one behind it. Don't ever lose the key. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories like this. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.